The topic of this video is developing active learning and critical reading skills. The main capital for the economic development of countries is the educated society. It's part of the spiritual potential of a country and the basis of language, culture, and literacy in its cultural life. The acquisition and mastery of the ability to read is a fundamental social and economic requirement of 21st century society. The 21st century is known as the age of complexity. The point of forming and developing systemic thinking competence is to upgrade our thinking to the level of seeing not just parts but whole systems. Building up competence for systemic thinking helps people cope with tasks of various degrees of complexity and at the same time avoid. The concept of systemic thinking appeared in the second half of the 20th century. The origin of the term and methodology of systemic thinking is still recent, but the first researcher to point it out was the biologist Ludwig von Bertalanffy. The human brain is able to perceive any object as a part of a system. In addition, it can decompose the entire system into individual structural parts. Systemic thinking is a mode of analysis that evaluates all the parts that are interrelated and make up a situation until they achieve a greater awareness of events and why. For example, a person is a complex creation consisting of many separate elements. All individual elements are united by complex, multifaceted connections into a single whole. Each, even the most insignificant element, affects the state of the system as a whole. Systemic thinking is characterized by defining the parts that make up a whole, hence its complexity, as it seeks to go beyond what is perceived at first glance. It's possible to get a broader view of the situation or problem you have to face. The principles of the systemic thinking process comprise openness, purposefulness, multidimensionality, controllability, and non-triviality. It is based on the systems theory. Its main principle is the universal model. A four-step methodology derives from this principle, and it applies to all areas where systematic thinking is applicable. The steps may vary slightly depending on the topic you're talking about. The four basic principles of system thinking are gaining a global vision, recognizing existing systems and their relationships, recognizing the elements that make them, exploring possible solutions. People who can think systematically are at different levels of possessing such thinking. Some may notice only one symptom. Others can see all the signs but cannot identify the interactions. The third group is inherent in the ability to identify all signs. Finally, there are people with the highest level of systematic thinking activity who can design signs themselves. Systems thinking is based on the methodology of scientific knowledge. From the perspective of cognitive activity, the thought process of each person can have some level of ability to think systematically. Zero-level incompetence is inherent. Zero-level people do not have the skills of systematic thinking. They cannot analyze the situation and act intuitively. It's difficult for them to isolate the main points and assess the risk. They ignore the most important circumstances. The first level is characteristic for people who are able to recognize the factors influencing events, structure information, and apply meaningful criteria. The systematic approach to the situation in such people can be traced exclusively in those areas where the person is well oriented. At the second level, people are able to analyze a large amount of various information, including complex and multifactorial phenomena. They can separate the main information from the secondary facts and recognize site and cause relationships. They are good at analyzing situations that go beyond their professional competence. Such people are characterized by diverse thinking, which allows you to develop several options for solving one problem. At this level of system thinking, a person is capable of creating new concepts that enable finding solutions to difficult practical problems. The ability to effectively complete the missing links of the system is inherent in the individual. A systematic approach to task performance is not limited to strict frameworks of standards. For the development of the systematic thought process, it's recommended to choose absolutely any object and divide the exercises to two stages in a group game. First stage, the chosen concept should be written on a piece of paper. Second stage, it's necessary to define a larger system that includes this concept of which it's a part. Maybe a birthday, an anniversary, a wedding. In conclusion, systemic thinking is essential for people engaged in science, art, education, politics, business, and management. At a time when our lives are more cluttered, more populated, more interconnected, more interdependent, and faster changing than ever before, the more perspectives we have, the better. System thinking allows us to develop our intuition about systems, sharpen our ability to understand the constituent parts, and see the interrelationships. We can ask what if question about possible future behavior and approach system changes creatively and boldly. Thus, we will be able to use our intuition to change ourselves and the world. According to the International Reading Association, adolescents entering the adult world in the 21st century will read and write more than at any time in human history. People will need advanced levels of literacy to be able to carry out their jobs, manage their households, act as citizens, and lead their private lives. They will need literacy to cope with the flow of information they'll encounter all around them. They will also need literacy to nurture their imagination to create the world of the future. Today, the meaning of the modern term literacy has been expanded to include the ability to use languages, numbers, images, computers, and other means of understanding and communication, acquiring useful knowledge, solving mathematical problems, and using the dominant symbolic systems of a culture. Much of this information that comes to us through reading. It also enables us to communicate. It's a method of sharing ideas and knowledge. Reading is the process of communication between the author of a text. Reading is a complex psychophysiological process. It's fundamental in-depth knowledge that one must acquire with diligence, time, and motive. Reading means understanding a written text, the use and applying the information it contains in the process of lifelong learning. Reading is much more than recognizing letters and words. It involves understanding. In general, reading can be defined as a basic speech activity in which the reader recognizes linguistic components and at the same time forms the essence of a text through his or her inner reasonings and feelings. The reading technique is a unity of two important skill groups: decoding skills, reading technique, and ability to understand what is read, conscious reading. These skills are in direct connection and interaction. Mindfulness is defined as the primary goal of reading and the technique of reading as a means to an end. In reading comprehension, the reader has an active role, that is, deciphers the message, analyzes it, thinks about it, builds a personal opinion. Reading comprehension is the ability to perceive ideas in a text and relate new information to previously available prior knowledge of the subject. The reader, decoding the written characters, gives meanings to the words. The reading comprehension process involves several phases of perception and recognition. First is understanding, where the meaning of the text assigned by the author is understood. Second is the interpretation by which the author's thought is discovered. In the third place is the reaction by which we agree or disagree with the author. And finally, integrating. To implement the reading, various reading techniques are used, some of which are predicting the content of the text through the title at first quick reading, establishing the relationship between what is expressed in the text and our knowledge, paraphrasing the text, which means retelling the text in our own words. These techniques lead to the four types of reading comprehension that Paul Burns points out: literally, interpretive, critical, creative understanding, types of understanding, literal understanding as the direct perception of information in a text. Interpretative understanding requires the discovery and interpretation of information that is not directly expressed in the text. Critical understanding evaluates what is read, compares the ideas in the material with familiar standards, and reaches conclusions about the correctness of the read in a certain context. Creative understanding is related to the emergence of new ideas in relation to what is read. When reading a text, all four types of text comprehension are encouraged, deepening critical and creative understanding. According to Robinson and Good, reading comprehension is divided into three main categories. Simple understanding involves the ability to correctly perceive information, to extract facts from the text, to follow the order of events, to determine the characters and the place of action, to follow instructions, to explain the structural plan of the text. Interpretation includes the ability to discover the main idea, to determine the main points, the storylines, to organize ideas, compare, summarize, and evaluate events, facts, and results. Critical understanding. For this kind of understanding, the following skills must be available: analytical thinking, critical thinking, ability to analyze the formal side of the text, ability to be aware of the subtext, ability to detect intertextual and contextual characteristics. Although the formation and application of reading comprehension skills are primarily associated with language instruction in the native language and the foreign language, reading comprehension is a general learning skill that is applied in all spheres. We find great benefits both for pragmatic purposes, instructions for the use of appliances, understanding directions and working hours, and in informal communication like notes, shopping lists at home for personal and official correspondence. Good reading comprehension skills of each person are a prerequisite for successful entry into the life of the